morning to everybody and welcome to this keynote session. I'm very glad to have two distinguished guests with me. First, we will have again a 2-hour session, and we will do the first speech, 45 minutes, and then 15 minutes of questions, and the same will hold for the second speech. The first speaker with us is Marco Montanari, who's an economist of education at DG Education in Brussels, and he will talk to us about the twin challenge of equity and excellence in the basic skills in the EU. Marco, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Daniele, for inviting me not as a colleague of the European Commission, but in your hat as a co-organizer of the conference. We don't want to be too self-complacent. Then, we need a caveat before we start our presentation here. Whenever you now go to a restaurant, you read the menu, and then you have a list of ingredients where it said, it may contain, for instance, nuts, eggs, so it may have allergenic effects. So I have to make a caveat with this presentation. It may contain depressing material. We'll try anyway to take a kind of positive stance and see how we can tackle this, what we call now the twin challenge of equity and excellence in basic skills. In the Commission we love the word twin. Now we have the twin transition, so digital and green. So we have to, now it's our way of seeing things. We are kind of binary people in the end. So we are simple people. So our reasoning is made of binary associations. Let's start with some assumption, because I think the main message from yesterday's discussions was that we have to be open and transparent about our assumptions in our work. So I will spend a couple of minutes trying to be as open as possible about the assumptions we make in our analysis of the challenge of basic skills based on PISA 2022. The first one, the first challenge, the first assumption, we do say that young people's basic skills are important for competitiveness. First question, what do we mean by competitiveness? We may mean several different things. Of course, we don't mean here competitiveness in a narrow sense, meaning being able to produce goods and services at the lowest possible cost. This is not our understanding of competitiveness. Our understanding of competitiveness is the same as, for instance, in the Draghi report. I can quote one or two sentences from Draghi's words and then reflect on them. Draghi says, if Europe can't become more productive, we will be forced to choose. We will not be able to become at once a leader of new technologies, a beacon of climate responsibility, and an independent player on the world stage. We will not be able to finance our social model. This is an existential challenge. The only way to meet this challenge is to grow and become more productive, preserving our values of equity and social inclusion. How does education fit into this picture? And clearly, education is one of the main sources of skills, future productivity, and also inclusion. At the same time, we can have it at the same time. I don't say it's a natural outcome. We have lots of examples throughout the world of countries and economies that were able to have important rates of growth and growing social inequality. But if we look at Europe from the lenses of an outsider, Europe, of course for us, Italy is very different from France, France is very different from Germany. But for a Chinese, for an American, what does Europe mean? Europe is not the continent where you have basically democracy almost everywhere. You have a decent welfare state. You have good levels of prosperity. Continent that has been able to keep peace inside at least the European Union. So this is what makes Europe different from the rest of the world, and this is what we want to preserve. But if we want to preserve it, the geopolitics has changed. We have to realize this. If we realize this, we know that we have to make sure, and then this is the link with education, for instance, that all young people can have the skills to find a decent job. we cannot have, we cannot afford that someone who can find a job becomes unemployed or inactive. This is also linked, think of the demographic trends. We made some simulations based on the Eurostat projections. Take Italy, take the age group between 3 and 18, which is kind of, generally speaking, school age population. Between 2022 and 2030, depending on the assumptions we make on migration rates, Italy is set to lose between 11% and 15% of the current population in that age group. I mean, that's huge. Similar, you can have similar values for other countries like Spain or Greece. So we desperately need to increase employment rates of young people, especially in countries where there is still this margin to increase. So it's a kind of double element, it's a virtuous circle. No, we need productivity and growth to ensure that we can promote inclusion, but at the same time, if we promote this kind of inclusion through education, we are also able to promote productivity and growth. So this is the assumption we make. Of course, if you believe in alternative views, like the growth theories, the crescita felice in Italian, or you think Europe is doomed, whatever we do, okay, what I'm going to say is meaningless. But I mean, I'm open in making this assumption. Second assumption, there is often a debate, also in international institutions, what is education for? Is it for the labor market, to prepare people for the labor market, or is it to, let's say, I'm simplifying it a bit, to build good citizens? Do we need to choose? That's my point. Do we really need to choose? Is there really a trade-off? Or can we combine the two elements? For instance, I mean, you may become a good citizen, but if you are not able to find a job, what is the impact on your perception, for instance, of society and democracy? So I think education is a very complex, we all know it's a very complex area, policy area, but we have the luxury here. We don't need to choose. We can have both. Of course, it's not something that may come out purely naturally, but that's what we assume it's possible. Then, to get to the third assumption, what does PISA measure? What a trivial question, you may say. PISA measures reading, maths, science skills of 15 years old. I mean, then it's less trivial than you might think. First, many people think of the media, say PISA measures the quality of an education system. Of course, it's not the case. First, PISA doesn't measure a wide range of skills that are necessary, from digital to languages, citizenship, and so on. So it only measures a subset of skills. But why do we call them basic skills? We call them basic because without them, you cannot really build on any other skill. If you're not able to understand what you read, if you're not able to apply some mathematical or scientific reasoning, how can you develop citizenship skills? Can you understand if what you read is fake or is trustworthy? Can you believe and understand also possibly limitations of science if you are not able to reason in a scientific way? Of course not. So this is why we say these skills are essential, because they are the foundations for all other skills, which are maybe equally important. But if we forget about basic skills, then we cannot reasonably build on anything else. And this is our third assumption. I'm concluding with the assumptions, then we go into the content, but I think it's important to be as transparent as possible. Then, of course, media are usually interested in average scores. This is what you see in newspapers, on the internet. That's perfectly fine, and if you need to summarize the performance of a country with a single number, that's fine. But we are interested in the distribution of the results, especially the left and the right tail. So what we're interested in is what we call underachievement. In PISA, it's called low achievement. I don't want to bother you with a history about language. You may know that PISA has six proficiency levels, from 1 to 6, and you can also have below 1. Underachievement means you are not able to reach at least level 2, which is considered as the minimum benchmark for today's society. It means you are kind of functionally illiterate, illiterate, and not able to apply any scientific reasoning. Conversely, top performance means reaching at least level 5, so level 5 or level 6 in PISA. It means you have excellent levels of skills. And here it's the double dimension, equity and excellence. Equity, in a broader sense, means not only that we want to try and decouple as much as possible performance from other factors such as socioeconomic background. We also mean that everybody has to be able to reach a minimum level of skills. For instance, to access the labor market, but also to become, be able to become a good citizen. That's the same view. And why also do we need many young people with excellent levels of skills? Think of future innovation. Where does it come from? It comes from young people who maybe are excellent in STEM, but we also need people with excellent skills also in reading in general. I mean, we don't want our future, let's say, leaders in whatever field to be functionally literate. I mean, I'm not making here any reference to any country or any political situation, but you can think of yourself. So this is why we think we need this approach. And now I stop here with all the assumptions, and I just wanted to give you an example of what we mean by level 2 in PISA. This is mathematics. You see, it's a very, the question is, okay, we had this pattern. If we extend, so we add a fifth row to the pattern, what would be the percentage of blue triangles in all the 5 rows? What does it mean? It means that you must be able to apply a minimum of abstract reasoning. So you have to imagine, you extend the triangle, and you have to make some proportion or calculation. Of course, you can do in several ways. You can do kind of intuitively. You can understand that you can apply some kind of algorithm to do the calculation without adding the fifth row. But what matters is that you must be able to go a bit beyond what you immediately see in this picture. And this is simply what is really the minimum needed. Of course, I'm not asking you to solve it, so don't worry, don't take notes. I'm pretty sure all of us here would be top performers in PISA, but we don't need to test it. We take it for granted. I mean, a few years ago, you may imagine, in an international organization, we like this kind of all-staff days or this kind of team building exercises. I proposed that all staff in DGEAC would sit a kind of PISA test. I didn't make myself popular with that, so we didn't. But we assume we are, of course, all top performers in all 3 areas. Okay, let's start our journey now. First of all, let's start with mathematics, because mathematics was the main subject tested in PISA 2022. I should also say that all EU member states, except for Luxembourg, participated in PISA 2022. Overall, across the world, 81 countries and economies participated in the survey. Here we have, okay, you see there is a yellow bar. This yellow horizontal bar is our own target for underachievement to be reached by 2030 at European level. It's part of what we call the European education area. You may remember yesterday Stefan Hermans explained what it is. It's set at 15%. You see nowadays only Estonia would meet it. In all the charts I'm going to show you, we have a kind of comparison between 2022 and first 2018, so the orange circle, which is the previous PISA test, and it's basically to see what happened in the short term, where the short term means also COVID-19. Then we also have a kind of longer term comparison with PISA 2012, so the small black horizontal bars, to see a bit what happened over the past decade, so to see if there are also probably other structural factors that may have changed, so not only COVID. And you see here the message is quite clear. You have a huge heterogeneity across countries, because you have Estonia 15%, and then you have Cyprus and Bulgaria about 15%. Italy is very close to the EU average, but the EU average itself is 30%. So 30% of European students are not able to reach minimum competence level. And here, I mean, the EU average is different from what you may see in OECD publication, because the OECD simply uses the arithmetic mean. So Germany and Malta has the same weight. In our reports, we calculate a weighted average, so based on the total population age 15. So it's a weighted average. 30%, and then you see that most of the increase in underachievement mathematics took place between 2018 and 2022, so the COVID period. Let's just keep this in mind for the conclusions. And you see that the situation deteriorated almost everywhere. There might be some exceptions, but this is the general pattern. If we go to reading, again, the situation is pretty similar. At European level, the average is 26%, so 1 in 4. Again, best performers being Ireland and Estonia, the only 2 countries that would meet our target. Here you see that the deterioration was more gradual. In a sense, it took place partly between 2012 and 2018, in particular between 2015 and 2018 in the area of reading, and then it continued, at least in many countries, it continued a bit between 2018 and 2022, but not as much as mathematics. Again, you have countries like in Bulgaria or Cyprus where you exceed 50%. Science, pretty similar situation in 2022. This year around 25%, or 24%, so very similar to reading. Here, the deterioration of the results mostly took place between 2012 and 2018. In particular, science was between 2012 and 2015. Again, Italy is very close to the EU average. I just wanted to show you something I forgot about in reading, as we are in Italy at least. You see, I hope there is no one from Finland in the audience, but say you see, Italy and Finland now perform at the same level in terms of underachievement in reading. So I always say, oh, we got Finland, we managed to get, but it's not really the case, it's Finland that saw a marked decline in its performance, while Italy remained more or less constant. So now we can say, oh, our students are as good as Finnish students. The trick is that the audience shouldn't know that Finnish students are not as good as they used to be in the past. Of course, the EU doesn't operate in a vacuum, so it's interesting to compare the EU average also with large advanced countries. Here we have the other G7 members that are not EU countries. We have Japan, Canada, the UK, and the US. Here you see the situation for the three skills. The EU doesn't perform comparatively well. It's similar to the US in mathematics, and it's clearly the worst in reading and science. And also, if you look over time, the relative position didn't really change. Interesting to see Japan. Japan, in most cases, improved its situation between 2018 and 2022. That's another factor that we should keep in mind. We are not comparing the EU with emerging countries because we prefer to keep the comparison with countries with similar level of developments. By the way, even if we wanted, China and India were not in PISA 2022, so we couldn't make the comparison. And China was before in PISA, but not the full country, only 4 of the most advanced provinces close to the Pacific Ocean, so it was always a biased picture of China. And didn't participate in 2022 because Chinese schools were still closed because of the lockdown, of the very severe lockdown there. Now, something that is absolutely not new. Socioeconomic background is probably the best predictor of underachievement. I show here the mathematics, but it would be very similar in reading and skills, in reading and science. First, what do we mean by socioeconomic background here in PISA? It's a composite index made of 3 dimensions, so it's attainment level of parents, it's profession of the parents, and a series of home possessions, which kind of proxy of family wealth. Here we show the top and the bottom quartile, so what we call advantaged students are the top quartile, what we call disadvantaged students, so the orange dots, are the bottom quartile. And then you see the difference is really very large, a bit everywhere. But when you see that also when it's close, it's usually the best performance. So countries that are able to reduce underachievement overall, they do this because they are able to reduce underachievement of disadvantaged students. This is an important message. At the same time, what is also kind of worrying in some countries is that even if you come from an advantaged background, you're quite at risk of being an underachiever. Take again Cyprus, Romania, Bulgaria, Malta, Croatia. I mean, they are above 15%, so our target for 2030. So even if you come from an advantaged background, there is no absolute certainty that you are not, you don't become an underachiever. Again, not a very new finding, but something that is clearly confirmed in PISA. If you have a migrant background, you may face a clear disadvantage. Where does it come from? It may come from 2 sources. Typically, migrant students in most countries, not all EU countries, but in most countries, have a lower socioeconomic background. That's a matter of fact. The second element is typically related to the language of instruction. If nobody in your family can speak the language of instruction, so you don't speak, you hardly speak the language of instruction outside school, of course this is a problem. Here you see the 18 EU countries that have a share of migrant students which is at least 5% of the student population. We excluded the others because then the sample is so small that it's difficult to draw meaningful conclusions. Then you may know that PISA splits migrant students into 2 categories. They call first and second generation. Here we explain what they mean. So first generation is students born abroad. So that then they move with their family to the country of instruction. Then second generation means students born in the country but whose parents were born abroad. Typical situation, for instance, my kids would be part of this second generation because their parents, me and my wife, were born in Italy, but they were born in Belgium. And this is irrespective of citizenship status. So it's really the country of birth. It's irrespective of having or not the citizenship of the country. And you see typically first generation students are more at risk of being underachievers, then it's a bit less for second generation students and even less for native students, quite a common pattern. Then you might be some exceptions, but they may also be due to the composition of migrant population. You may see Ireland, Cyprus, they're a bit of, I would say, kind of outliers to this pattern. And now, imagine now we take a mirror and we take the image we had for underachievement and we transfer it to top performance. It's like looking it in a mirror, exactly the same kind of pattern. Let's start with mathematics. Very strong decline, especially between 2018 and 2012. At EU level, only 8% of students reach excellent levels of competence in mathematics. Again, quite big difference across countries. You have the Netherlands, for instance, with 15%, and then you have Greece at 2%. Italy here is a bit below, it's a bit below the average. But it's exactly the same picture with pattern we saw before. The same for reading. Here the average is at 7%, decline over time. and again, quite some variability across countries. Again, Italy is a bit below the average. Copy-paste for science. Exactly the same, 7% at U level. The only difference is that the situation didn't change between 2018 and 2022. So the decline took place before. And again, if we compare the EU with the other G7 economies, we don't perform comparatively well. We are at the same level as the US in mathematics, and then we are clearly the worst ones in reading and science. You may wonder, for instance, where are the top performers? So you see Japan, it's about 20%, and the best one is Singapore. You may say, of course, Singapore may be an outlier. It's a city-state, very specific kind of economy. Singapore is 40%. Let's consider Singapore an outlier. You have Japan and other Eastern countries and economies which are well above 15%. And again, same picture for socioeconomic background. Very, very few students from disadvantaged backgrounds reach level 5 or level 6 in PISA, so the orange dots. The best one is the Netherlands with 5%, and then you have countries basically, it's not statistically different from zero. While for advantaged students, you have almost a third of students in the Netherlands, which, interesting, the Netherlands is one of the countries with the largest impact of socioeconomic background in the EU. And then Italy, again, is a bit in the middle group, so we have close to 15% among advantaged students and around 3% among disadvantaged students. Okay, this is for the gloomy picture, so the depressing material. Let's try and also see something more positive. The more positive message is that there is not necessarily a trade-off between reducing underachievement and increasing top performance. We could demonstrate it in a more formal way, but the simple ways is just a scatter plot. You have the underachievement rate and top performance, you have the correlation, and then you see it's quite strong, and it's a kind of negative correlation, which is a positive message for us. So where underachievement is low, top performance tend to be high. Of course, there is nothing deterministic here. Just look at the Netherlands. I mentioned Netherlands is a bit of an outlier to this pattern. But this is a positive message. Again, it's a kind of luxury we have in education. We don't need to necessarily choose whether we want to promote equity or promote excellence. We can do both at the same time. Again, I say we can, no, it's automatic. I say we can. Let's look also at some complementary elements, because there is a lot of data in PISA. Let's see what could also be interesting for our contextual analysis. The issue of well-being. I mean, I can tell you, whenever we spoke of well-being before COVID, also the European Commission, they said, okay, it's important to look at well-being at school. Some people thought, what do you mean? Do you mean that schools have to build spas? No, of course, we don't mean this. So we used, okay, think of bullying, do you understand what we mean by bullying? So that was maybe the easiest element to, of course, it's much more than just it's bullying, it's sense of belonging, all what is related to psychological situation of students. What do we see here? We see in the upper panel, it's the share of what we call frequently bullied students. By frequently bullied, we mean students that report being victim of bullying acts at least a few times a month. It can be also every week, can be every day, but at least more than once a month. You see it ranges between 10 and 30%. Of course, take into account the fact that, as all background questions, there might be also some cultural biases. For instance, some acts maybe in Mediterranean countries they may be considered as jokes. In northern countries they may be considered as bullying. So taking into account that there might be also different perceptions, but this is the picture we have. And then the association with overall performance is clearly negative. You see it's statistically significant in most countries, and it goes more than for instance, the 20 score points in many places. Of course, this is correlational, but a lot of literature now is trying to go beyond correlation and show that there is probably a causal link between well-being, in this case, pooling, and performance. So this is something we have to take into account. Then I think just to summarize the quite a complex relationship between the use of digital and digital tools and performance, I think we can go to Mary Poppins. For Italian speakers, it's the jingle in Italian is con un poco di zucchero la pillola va giù. So it's kind of paraphrase it. So just a spoonful of digital helps performance go up, but more makes it go down. So what do we see here? Here we see that if we move from no use of digital tools to 1 hour per day, you see it's the orange bars. In most cases, there is at least a positive association with performance. Then the blue dots are the overall change in mathematics performance associated with an hour increase. So, and you see that in most cases it's negative. What does it mean? It means that if the more you use, the more negative the association becomes. This is, of course, of association, not of causality. But this is a clear and important message that the relationship between the use of digital tools, and this is for learning activities at school. So it's a subset of the total use of digital tools. Of course, it's for learning activities and at school. The relationship is clearly complex and it's non-linear. And then it's time to move towards summarizing what we have seen. So we have a decline. We do have a decline in performance in peace in the EU. So what could be the causes? Should we only blame COVID? Of course, in recent research, and some people here have contributed also to our understanding of the effects of the COVID-19 crisis, show that overall, of course, certain degree of heterogeneity, but overall it worsened educational outcomes and increased educational inequalities. Of course, more in some contexts than in others, with a lot of nuances, but that I think it's a clear message. And especially for mathematics, it's also intuitive, it's more difficult to teach mathematics in a remote setting than reading. So this is what we see in many countries, and it's consistent with what we have seen in PISA. However, we've also seen that several countries were already experiencing a declining trend before COVID, especially in reading and science. So there must be also something else. But again, we have to be first humble. Nobody can provide, at least not yet, a clear-cut answer, so identify a kind of trend that could be common to all or most European countries. So we need to look also on probably also national sources of data to understand what's happening when it's available, what has happened over time. And also look at policy, what were the structural changes in education system and also around education systems over at least the past 10 years. Let me give you 2 examples of areas where some literature is emerging, but there is still, in my view, at least a lot of work to do. First, the use of digital tools at school, but also outside school. Because we tend often to focus to the use of digital tools for educational purposes. Of course, it's our job. But then we should remember that the use of digital tools doesn't stop when a student leaves its school. What can be, typically, what's the impact of the use of smartphones, especially outside the school context? Now, here there is quite a growing literature, especially in social psychology, pointing to heavy risks, at least in the area of psychological well-being. For instance, for the use from social media, there might be lots of gender nuances in the, which kind of activities may be more harmful for girls or for boys. there is still quite limited causal evidence on that. We have a lot of correlational evidence, which is quite strong. So it may suggest that there might be something at work. So maybe there might be channels that go from excessive use of, for instance, of smartphones to psychological well-being to performance. We don't really have the kind of final proof in terms of causal terms, but a lot of literature is going in that direction. So we should understand, and it's quite suggestive that typically the mass use of smartphones started around 2012. It's a bit suggestive, but it's then of course one should understand if it had the same impact in Europe, in Japan, in other parts of the world. So I think it could be a really interesting area of research. Then the second one, again, it's suggestive in the sense that it's something that happened at the same time as the decline in performance. Many countries also following a recommendation, if you want, from the European Commission, try to change their curricula, moving typically from a more traditional knowledge-based curriculum to a competence-based curriculum. So far, so good. But were we able to train teachers to be able to teach according to this new curricula? Imagine you are a teacher. You typically teachers, it's an aging profession. In Italy, the average age is about 50. You have worked for 20 to 30 years, maybe with excellent results, teaching in a certain way. Then you are asked to change the way you teach. And it's not only the use of digital tools, that's already part of the story, but really to change your approach. Is it easy? Probably not. So we have to also think maybe, and this of course is something that is difficult to do at international level, we really need to go deeper into national specificities. But it's something that I think should be open investigated, also from our side, because we have been strong supporter of good competence-based curricula. But of course we should understand if the way we promoted it really worked or not. So, conclusion on this part, and then the last 5 minutes are just, let's say, I want to present you what we are trying to do to help member states in this area. So I try to show you that when you have these three starting conditions, so 30% of students underachieving mathematics, and roughly 1 in 4 in reading and science, plus half of the students coming from a disadvantaged background fail to reach a minimum competence level in mathematics, plus less than 10% of students are top performers or have excellent levels of competencies in any of the 3 PISA subjects, then both the equity and excellence dimension of our education systems are a threat. And this challenge becomes even more visible and pressing if we compare the EU with other large advanced economies. So what are we trying to do together with our member states? Of course, I will never stop mentioning this. Member states have exclusive competence on their national or even regional education systems. What we can do at European level is to try to support them, to put them together, to provide evidence, to provide any tools to help them, but we cannot impose anything. We cannot impose the age for starting compulsory education. We cannot impose, and rightly so of course, we cannot impose the characteristics of the curriculum. So what are we doing? First, just a few words, because also Stefan Hermans spoke about it yesterday. Funding for the school sector. I mean, it's quite sizable. Of course, it's only a fraction of what countries spend on their own national budget, but it's quite sizable. The figures here, so 43 billion from the Recovery and Resilience Facility, 16 billion from the cohesion policy, are just for the school sector. If we think of education and skills as such, we come to 75 billion from the Recovery and Resilience Facility, for instance. I'm not spending much time on this. I would like to spend a few more words on 2 other elements, which I'm just going to list now, and then we'll see more. We are trying to help member states understand what works in education, and here we have still quite a new initiative, the Learning Lab on investing in quality education and training. And we have, from 2022, we have a policy framework which is called Pathways to School Success. So let me spend a few words on these two areas. First, the Learning Lab. What we know is that we can discuss we don't need to convince each other about the importance of education, but we have to convince the finance ministries. And the way we have to follow to convince finance ministers to spend on education is to show that we bring results in terms of effectiveness, equity, and also efficiency. To the extent possible, that at least we don't spend money, huge amount of money, to get very little results. So here we cover three areas with our countries. First, we provide also training on evaluation methodologies, especially in public administrations which may not really be familiar with this training. To give you some examples, we organize trainings in Ireland, Portugal, the French-speaking community of Belgium, Latvia, and there will be another one next week in Malta. This is done by our colleagues in the Joint Research Center from ISPRA. We have a collaborative work strand, so among member states we created what we call a community of practice, which brings together all potentially interested parties from ministries of education, agencies. So I also invite INVALSI in the future to join us to discuss issues of common interest, how, for instance, to collect data for evaluations, which methodologies can be more appropriate for certain kinds of evaluation. So this is what we do also with member states. And then also the third area is the analysis and evaluation of education policies. Here with our limited amount of budget, we do several things. The first one, we can produce also in-house some analysis of education. We can help member states design and also carry out evaluation activities. We also finance research through the Horizon Europe program, and some friends here in the room are actively working on Horizon projects that are linked to the activities of the Learning Lab. Then this pathway to school success, technically what we call a council recommendation, which, translating from jargon, is a document where member states commit themselves to doing something and ask also the Commission to support them. The idea here is to link three elements, so trying to reduce low achievement in basic skills together with increasing secondary educational attainment, which means reducing early school leaving, and also promoting well-being at school. As I showed you, we understand now that there is a link also between well-being and performance at school. So the aim is, to the extent possible, to decouple education outcomes from socioeconomic status. Of course, we will never reach that level. If we think in history, probably the period when in Europe the education system was more equitable was in the first centuries of the Middle Ages, where basically 99% of the population was illiterate. In that sense, being a member of the elite or being a poor peasant didn't make any difference. But of course, this is not what we mean in our world by equity. But of course, we have to take into account that we can reduce the impact, that we will never manage to completely decouple outcomes from background. What is in this document? We ask, and we are working with member states so that they can develop a strategy for school success which combines universal measures and targeted and individualized support, and also supported by data collection and monitoring, because without data we cannot know much about it. And then we have a policy framework, of course, to inspire possible national reforms. And then at the Commission we also work with member states to our typical activities, so exchange of practices and peer learning. This is what we do. And the very final point is, of course, that we are in a period of change at the Commission. We will have a new College of Commissioners, hopefully as of the 1st of December. And some actions have already been announced in public documents about the future, let's say, work plan of the Commission. We call it in different ways, but with jargon-free language, we can call it a kind of work program. And there are three initiatives. The first one is a STEM education strategic plan, which should focus and should cover all educational levels, so including also higher education, and looks at such factors as how to make STEM careers more attractive, how to promote participation of girls and women in STEM, how to better teach STEM competencies. Then there will be an action plan on basic skills, which on the one hand will have a narrower scope in the sense that it will focus on school education, so not higher education, but larger coverage, because here basic skills means the three PISA skills plus also digital. And it will look so not only at reducing low achievement as we have done so far, but also how to improve the rate of top performance, or at least to improve competencies at all levels for all students. And then the final point is the EU teachers agenda. I mean, spelled this way, maybe an English native speaker might have some doubts on, probably will change in our document, because there's either too much, it should be teacher agenda or teachers agenda, but this is how we have it in our documents. And this is a plan, at least, to support the teaching profession in helping our kids to improve their competencies. So this is in a nutshell what we do, and this is basically the product of all the assumptions I made at the beginning. As I said before, if you don't believe in the assumptions I made, probably the last 30 minutes were something completely useless for you. But if you believe in our assumptions, I think this is a kind of effort that we are collectively doing. So at our level, at the European Commission, other international institutions, data providers, national and local governments, actors on the field, from teachers, school leaders, families, stakeholder associations. This is something where everybody can have a role. I mean, I would say even more, everybody has a decisive role. There are different roles, but all are necessary. And this is where we want to work together to make sure that Europe can continue promote its values of prosperity, democracy, and inclusive growth. Thank you very much.